Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum to you all. I hope everyone is doing fine this evening. My name is Sakina Rashid, and I will be your moderator for this event. Joining us, we have powerful speakers who aim to raise awareness and also just be part of this movement as a whole, because this is one of our main taboo issues in our culture. And I'm confident that I'm not the only one who's most excited about this event, along with many, many other people who have unfortunately gone through things like this or have had to assist their friends or their loved ones when it comes to situations like these that are shockingly common and that need to be addressed. So to begin with, what is sexual assault? Sexual assault covers a wide range of unwanted behaviors on a person. So it could be a man, it could be a woman, or even worse, a child. And these are often used by offenders as a way to assert power or control over another person. And if you've gone through something of this sort in the past, you might experience a range of emotions, but you do need to know that there are support services and people that can help you. I know for a fact that there are so many people who can relate to what I'm talking about and who have been in that situation and just feel like, what's the point of me speaking up? Why should I reach out? I'm just going to be judged. What if my reputation gets affected? What's going to happen to my family? What are they going to think about it? And eventually the world just no more feels like a safe place. But we're here today, we're gathered, and we're standing against this act of oppression and this act of violence. And we hope that one day people won't feel like they're obliged to remain silent. It will be hard, but once you get out of it, once you speak up, you can live your life freely and you'll be able to get back the control that was taken away from you. Also, soon, inshallah, we will have another session that will cover the Islamic perspective on this issue with great scholars. And we also look forward to hearing from you through our social media platforms as to how this issue can be tackled. So please stay tuned for our big upcoming event. On that note, I would like to introduce a very well-known speaker who really needs no introduction, Sakina Hassanali. She's a marketing professional and an illustration artist. She's originally from Tanzania and she's now based in Toronto. She holds a bachelor's in mass communications from Boston University and has worked in branding and marketing roles in Tanzania, the US, the UK, and Canada. Sakina is also the founder of Sakudo. Through detailed and bold ink and digital illustrations, she focuses on creating art, brands, and apparel that aim to leave an impact on people and relationships through topics of self-expression and self-commentary. Sakina is also a longtime debater and public speaker. She has represented her schools and community in national and international debate and speaking competitions, including the Hague International Model United Nations. She's also been the host of local talk shows in Tanzania, most notably The Voice of a Woman, and continues to speak on several platforms about women's issues, illustration art, branding, and her faith. Before we move on, I would just like to state that this event has not been organized to target any personality or personalities or cross-section of the community in that case. Rather, it's for the purpose of spreading awareness about an issue that exists between us and really needs to be spoken of. So, Sakina, what do you think? Has our culture addressed this issue, or rather, does it exist in the first place?
Okay, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Before I dive into talking about this a little bit, I want to say a few things. First of all, thank you for the introduction, Sakina. It's really nice to see you hosting this, and I'm very proud that our youth back home are taking such a strong stance to provide resources and literally lift the lid, right? That's what we're going to do today. I know we're just scratching the surface and we're just lifting the lid, but inshallah, I hope and I pray that this is a step in the right direction. And I just want to say that I'm very proud of the youth back home for doing this. So kudos. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of effort to organize something like this, and inshallah, I hope that you always get more success in the future. That's number one. Number two, I want to say that I want to recognize that I'm not an expert in the issue. Okay. So I don't want, so whatever I say, I say from some personal experience, talking to some abuse victims, just my general passion for women's issues and women's rights, and really trying to be a very, very small voice, that in the hopes that, if I agree to talk about it today and I address this issue as a, a member of my faith and a member of my community, inshallah, my hope is that it encourages others to talk about it. Because like you said, Sakina, this is a very, very taboo topic. And there's many reasons for that. And, I'll get to that, obviously. But, we have to face the fact that, this is not something that has been talked about for a very long time. I want to say for generations, this is an issue that's really been swept under the rug. And as much as, we should definitely, face this headstrong and talk about the issue, and get experts in line to make sure that, we're conversing the right way and we're addressing the issues properly. I would also like to say that let's deal with it with some compassion, because for so many people, it's such a raw issue, and it triggers so much trauma and so much pain. That, while we are talking about it, let's try and show some compassion. Okay, so I'll say that. And, then, and now I'll definitely address your question. Okay, so I see that everybody is gone except for me. So I'll just continue. Hopefully you all are still there and you can hear me properly. So the question of, this is a taboo topic. Why is it that we shy away from it? Why is it that we avoid the topic? How is it that, we've allowed this to continue for so long, and really swept it under the rug? And there's many reasons to that. And I'll let, we have a third speaker who's a psychologist to really unpack that properly, because she has the expertise. But, I will give my 2 cents to that question. So I think one of the main reasons that we shy away from it is, a reason that Sakina Rashid's already mentioned, right, in the beginning when she was doing the introduction. The reason it's such a taboo and the reason we shy away, talking about the issue is because of fear. Fear stops us to do so many things, and fear about so many other things will stop us from coming forward. So that's one of the reasons, I think. Fear of, losing your family, fear of losing a close loved one, fear of losing friends, fear of being judged, fear of being ostracized by your society, fear of having, to recognize that, oh my God, now I'm going to have to deal with this trauma. Fear of thinking that, will I be able to really come out of this, or will it take me to, a series of, depression and anxiety? So it's important that we recognize that, fear is one of the reasons why this happens, right? The second reason, I think, is the lack of consequences. Okay, whenever the societies are set up in such a way that, if you do something wrong, you're punished for it, or the world teaches you that you can't do certain things because you're taking somebody's haqq, or you're wronging somebody. But because this is something that is so intertwined in our personal lives, and we're so fearful of the consequences, that there is a lack of accountability. And I think our communities and the systems are not set up in place to, in a safe way, provide resources for the victims, or at the same time have some sort of accountability and consequences for the abusers. So I think those seem to be, the main reasons of why this happens. So I think one of the other things that I want to mention, I think I want to believe that most of us are aware of how prevalent this issue is. Perhaps we don't like to talk about it. Perhaps, it's a very hard pill to swallow, and it's very difficult to sit there and think about, your society or your circle or your community facing this, because it's such a painful issue. Apart from it being a wrong one, you see friends and family going through so much pain and separation when something like this happens. But as hard as it is to talk about, I think we have to understand that, we may think that this is an external issue. We may believe that this happens at parties, this happens at university, in a classroom maybe. But that's really not the reality. The settings of this can be very scary. It happens in homes. It happens by family members. It happens by family friends. And it ends up being that because of fear and because of the lack of consequences and a lack of resources for the victims, it ends up being almost normalized, which is a very scary thing. So, I hope that answers, the question, Sakina, right? Your first question about why is it that we cover it up? Okay. And I want to say one more thing. I have my notes here because, like I said, I'm not an expert in this issue, in no way. And I just want to be a member of my community who can just be part of the conversation, so that, we're moving in the right direction. All of us, we have little voices, in our circles, right? Whether we have a voice and, people listen to us in our families and take our advice seriously, whether, we have a following, whether, we are, many people are prevalent within the communities. It really, I think, becomes, this sense of responsibility that we need to have as women and men, to talk about this issue. And again, I'm here so that I can just add to that conversation, and I encourage everybody that let's think about this long term, and we want to make sure that we're in the right side of history as well. 10 years, 20 years down the line, we want to make sure that we can say that, we supported this issue, and we supported the victims, or we raised the little voices that we have in our own circles. Because, and I know I'm digressing a little bit, but I just want to mention this because we're talking about community and talking about this and raising an issue. A lot of times we think, and I used to believe this, that, change has to be this big thing that happens. You go up and you give this speech, or, you post something and you get all these likes, and that's going to bring change. Well, that can start off change. It can get people talking about it, but it really takes talking about these uncomfortable conversations with your own circle, with your own family unit, with your own unit of friends. And then, the ripple effect is what then we hope that, inshallah, 10 years down the line, 5 years down the line, people are talking about it. Now we have resources. We're holding people accountable. So I just wanted to kind of add that. So the other thing that I wanted to say is, one of the reasons we shy away from talking about it is because I believe, and I think Nadia can shed more light on this later on, is that, when you go through something so traumatic, it's very difficult in that moment to even understand and comprehend what you're going through. So when we look at for example, child abuse, sometimes very later on in a child's life, maybe they'll realize that they went through something that wasn't right, because perhaps they weren't talked to about their body properly, or they weren't told these are no touch zones, stranger danger, things like that, right? So especially when it's done by people who are so close to us, and a lot of times, again, I think the bigger precursor is fear and the lack of consequences. So I hope that answers your question, Sakina. Yeah.
Sorry, Sakina.
Yeah.
Why is it that some people argue that it's because of the way a woman has like dressed up in a certain way? So let's talk about that. What are your
Yeah.
views on?
Yeah, that's a tough one to talk about, obviously. And I'll give my 2 cents, but in no way, again, am I an expert in this or even uh, well versed in like my faith to an extent that I can do this question justice. But I will give my 2 cents. So this is what I think, right? Um, First of all, when we say something like that, we have to understand that we are completely lifting the responsibility of such an act of abuse and of assault. We're lifting the responsibility entirely from the abuser and the accuser, I mean, the abuser. And we have to really understand that when we say something like that, which is said very often, that there are consequences to something like that. That's how you completely take away support from a victim, and that's what again fuels someone not wanting to come and share their story. you know um, Now I will say that in terms of because this is some sort of, I believe, an Islamic conversation. There are guidelines that are presented to us regarding our hijab, right? Hijab for men and hijab for women, right? And I think those guidelines are set so that they can prevent such things, obviously, right? Whether that's hijab, whether that's source segregation, the guidelines are set to protect each other. Okay, number one. Number two, I also believe that sometimes we fail to understand that Islam is a very collectivistic religion. We think about rights of orphans. We think about inheritance rights. So it's a religion that is communal, and we kind of take care of each other's actions as well. We support each other. But that being said, there's no justification to say that because a woman dressed a certain way, that gives somebody a right to commit an action. And I think that to say something like that is really taking away the little voice that the victim has left, um, and the little courage that they might have gets taken away, because then there is no support whatsoever. And the other thing that I really want to add is that there are cases where people follow guidelines, right? Where a woman can be in hijab, for example. A woman could be in a burqa, where women, yes, where children are abused, sexually abused, and sexually assaulted, right? So we can talk about guidelines in terms of prevention and making sure that we're safe, and keeping ourselves safe and sound. But the reality of the matter is that this happens even when women are covered, or it happens to children. And so what ends up happening, I believe, is that we literally we end up punishing the woman for an action that is committed against her by a man, right? Or vice versa. Sometimes it definitely happens. I don't want to take away from that, but more often than not, it's the woman who is not in a position of power and the man is. Or, for example, we punish children directly or indirectly throughout their lives for actions and crimes committed against them by adults. And so we should be very careful that when we are having these conversations, we're not taking away responsibility from the accused, the abuser. One other thing that I want to mention that I feel very strongly about is, again, when we talk about the idea of modesty, or when we talk about bringing up our children and the idea of hijab. It's great that we talk to our girls about it when we're raising them. Be careful. Make sure that you're aware of your surroundings. Make sure that you're covered and you're dressed modestly. And we talk about all these. We tell them so much, and we give them so much advice, and we really prepare them for the real world, right? But I don't believe that we do the same with men. The fact that you know, hijab even, and again, I hope that, when you guys have this conversation with scholars, they'll give you, better feedback on this, and a more expert opinion. But when we are taught about hijab, and when you look at hijab in the Quran, it's mentioned for both man and a woman. And we have uncomfortable conversations with our girls about their bodies, right? But we really shy away from talking to boys about their hijab and about their responsibility in a community, in a society. Why is it, and how is it that, if not complete assault or rape, most women can say that like they were groped in a very uncomfortable way by someone in their life, or by a passerby? Why is it that that's so normalized, and that it's kind of become like, yeah, so yeah, oh, that happened, it's not a surprise anymore? you know we talk about preparing our girls, and preparing them for the real world, but sometimes I really think we shy away for a lot of cultural reasons. We shy away from having the same consequences and having the same difficult conversations, and really putting responsibility on our boys. And we're doing them a disservice as much as we're doing the women a disservice, and as much as we're doing the community and the society a disservice. So I think we should really think about, I think, as parents, as the community, as people who have a platform to talk about these things, to talk about them towards boys and men, as much as we talk about it with girls. And another thing that I want to say is that we have normalized talking about women's bodies so much, whatever culture you look at. And this is not just like a cultural problem in the East. Objectifying a woman's body for whatever reason has been so prevalent throughout history, that when you look at pop culture, when you look at the movies and the and the shows that we watch, we've really normalized. And even in our own little circles, we've normalized talking to a woman about her body in a way that's extremely negative. And the reason I say normalize it is that we've made things that shouldn't be said normal, and we say them to women all the time. And I also notice that these things are being said to men. But what ends up happening is that when you normalize following a girl in the pretext that it's romance, while in actual fact it's harassment, and you don't correct those issues and you don't talk about them, then they become so normalized that they lead to something way more serious and heinous. And that ends up affecting women for their entire lives, and children for their entire life. So I hope that covers that question, inshallah, and hopefully we can hear from the other panelists as well, and what their thoughts are.
Definitely.
Of course.
You've definitely provided a very valuable insight to the role our church has played in this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so introducing our next speaker, we have Masuma Sonji, who's an activist, a mental health advocate, and a meditation guide. She's the co-founder of Ukweli Wangu, which is a movement against sexual harassment in Tanzania. It is aimed at spreading awareness about all forms and types of sexual harassment against both men and women, which have been normalized and thus a taboo topic in the society. She will be giving us an insight as to what being a victim felt like, how she coped with it, and is a great inspiration for other people to look up to. So Masuma, what are some of the forms of sexual harassment you would be focusing on today?
Hi, Sakina. Thank you so much for having me here and giving me this platform to speak about these things. And kudos to you guys. Like, this is amazing that you guys have started this. So personally, I think that before we get into sexual harassment, it's so important that we understand what the form and types of different sexual harassments are. It can be from something that we have normalized and become so okay with something very, very small, like catcalling on the street. And then can go to, as Sakina said earlier, something that we've almost all of us have been through, like groping or something. You're in a very, I don't know, you're in a bus, and someone just passes by and like touches you in a definitely a very, very bad manner, but you're not even sure that happened, kind of thing. You're like, should I say something, should I not, like, I'm not sure, or many a times, like if you're going to meet somebody, and you're shaking hands, and this person is holding your hand a second more, and while it might be just a second more, but it is there, and you realize that this is just not fine, this is just not okay. And then the other form of sexual harassment is um, cyber sexual harassment. So, and I think a lot of you will have noticed that a lot of pictures, when they're put on, there are these very, very disgusting comments that come up across, or someone sends their nude pictures on a DM, and this happens very, very commonly, and this is very disgusting. But it's prevalent. It's very much prevalent. And then we go to actual rape happening, which I think we've made most noise about child rape happening because it's super disgusting. Like, what justifies, like a father raping a child, an uncle raping a child? Like, what just justifies that? It's just so disgusting in our heads that this is all we'll speak about that, but there's so many more forms, and from rape that is happened by total strangers to rape that is happened in marriages. And I think that's the one topic that we don't speak about at all. The rape that happens in spouses, marriages, or a dating couple, and we don't speak about it at all. There are many, many countries in this world that don't even have a law that is against marital rape or spousal rape. So yeah, these are like few sort of types of sexual harassment that I feel are around, and we all go through them.
Thank you so much. You've definitely made it clear. There definitely are a lot of things that to many other people may seem minor, but they definitely go a long way. Also, Masma, would you like to tell us more about the movement that Ukweli Wangu focuses on and how they've established that?
Sure. So we started off, I think, as a sort of a Me Too movement because we wanted people to speak out. But we realized that shaming people is not helping. When we're bringing out names, yes, that person, maybe one person will get some sort of justice. But what will happen is that this thing keeps happening, and it'll keep happening all the time. We're not actually getting to the main the main thing. We're only picking out, and we're only trying to give justice to the few that are actually able to speak out. So we have worked on Ukweli Wangu being an awareness platform that we're going to work on sharing stories. Some anonymously, some who want to share with their names, are very welcome to. But we'll be doing a lot of workshops, and those workshops will aim to give a lot of sexual education to women, to men, and we want to normalize speaking about it so that from these stories, everybody connects and thinks that, okay, I have been through this and this is wrong. Many a times what happens is that a lot of people go through sexual harassment but don't realize it for many, many years, because it's not like everybody's raped immediately. It's not there's force. It's mostly that it could be somebody who's made you very uncomfortable. You don't want it, but there are reasons why you don't say no. You're scared. You're afraid maybe he'll hit you. You're I don't know, afraid of the surroundings. You don't know where to go. so you just go with it, and then you realize that, hey, this was, when you hear somebody else's story, you realize that, hey, this is, this was a sort of harassment. They broke my my trust, my consent was not there. And so we want to bring out these stories, and we want to give a platform for women to speak out, but also to be aware on what is okay and what is not okay, so that so that we can stand up for ourselves.
Thank you so much, Masma. I know we all know that you've gone through a lot in the past, unfortunately. But I would want to ask, if you're comfortable with it, how did you cope with it, and did you ever choose to speak up about it, or what did you do to get out of that situation?
So, wow, this is difficult. I can say that I have been through almost all forms of this sexual harassment. Whether it being catcalling and being very uncomfortable by it, whether it being groped in a train or a bus, or I remember that I was like 12, 13 years old when someone flashed in like a hotel room that looked over my window. And I was so uncomfortable. I was scared. I was very young and I didn't know what was happening. And I remember that I spoke about it to my friend. And I wrote a letter. And it didn't go so well because her parents found it and my parents found it, and I was punished for it. And as a child, I did not know what was wrong. I had been through marital rape a few times. And probably this is the first time I'm actually saying publicly about it.
What would you suggest that someone else in your situation would do to get out of it as quickly as possible?
It's very hard. The first thing is acknowledging that this is wrong. Only when we acknowledge is when we will speak out. Only when we will feel it wrong is when we will speak out. The problem is that we have normalized these things so much that we think that men will be men, boys are boys. They're going to be like that. They will always have an upper hand over us. They will, I don't know, especially in with spouses, it's always that the men will always have an upper hand, so we can't really say anything. How am I going to prove or say that, my own spouse did this to me? So the first thing to acknowledge that this is wrong, and I think once we feel that this is very wrong is when we can put a stop and be able to speak up about it.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much again, Massimo, for courageously sharing with us your personal experiences and just being honest about the unfortunate situation you found yourself in. Hopefully, and I'm sure that other people can relate to it and pick up useful lessons from what you just talked about.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to our next speaker is Ms. Nadia Ahmed. She's a psychologist and registered counselor, a lecturer, a yoga and mindfulness meditation teacher, a life coach, mental health and wellness expert, the founder and director of Mind Matters Counseling and Human Development. She's a TEDx speaker, a Young African Leaders Initiative, African Women Entrepreneurship Cooperative Fellow. As you can already tell, Ms. Nadia seems to be a very commendable person with wonderful capabilities. Her interests lie in providing holistic services that blend psychology and preventative interventions, such as yoga, that focus on support and promote the enhancement of well-being to guide in the actualization of one's highest sense of self. Ms. Nadia Ahmed is a psychologist. I repeated that again. Okay, so Ms. Nadia, what are some of the psychological conditions that are most common among sexual assaulted survivors?
Mute. Okay. Thanks, Sakina. So yes, thank you for that nice introduction as well. I think the most common, I've actually worked a lot with survivors. I don't like calling people who've gone through any form of abuse as victims, because that puts us in a very hopeless position. If I'm a victim, things happen to me and there's nothing I can do about it. And I feel a lot of the time the language we use when we're addressing survivors of violence, any form of violence, also either empowers them or disempowers them. So being a bit more mindful as well to the language we use can go a long way. And while I think when I was in South Africa, so I worked for about a year in South Africa, and I worked at a trauma center for survivors of violence and different forms of torture. And most of my clients were survivors of sexual assault and abuse. And most of the clients I worked with were refugees as well. So they went through quite extensive trauma in their home countries where they're coming from, a lot of violence. And a lot of the time when there is a war or any form of political unease, women fall victim to a lot of sexual assault. And it's completely barbaric. I remember I experienced, I didn't have to, but I experienced secondary trauma from all the work that I was doing with my clients. And one, or the most prominent, perhaps, mental health condition that survivors go through or experience are post-traumatic stress, and depression, as well as anxiety. And a lot of the time, sometimes the assault can trigger dormant or, what's the word? Biological conditions that were there. So a lot of the mental illnesses are also inherited in the person's bloodline or family line. And usually these forms of assaults become a trigger. However, if we exclude that, the most common mental health conditions that survivors would experience are PTSD for most of the part, anxiety, as well as depression. Those are the three major mental health conditions, as well as some now tend to develop more or less like a paranoid personality aspect. So I wouldn't say personality disorder altogether, but a lot of them would experience a lot of paranoid personality symptoms and aspects because of the experience that they've had. And when we look at PTSD in itself, it shares similar symptoms with a lot of other mental health conditions. And so with most survivors, I would, perhaps in my experience, what I've seen is a lot of them experience post-traumatic stress. And if it goes untreated, it leads to a lot more other conditions. If it's left untreated or unaddressed, it leads to depression. It leads to long-term anxiety or prolonged anxiety, chronic anxiety, if we can say even. And so, to answer your question, those are the three perhaps most common that I've encountered personally, and a couple of my colleagues have encountered as well.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So what would you say is the way forward? Like how would people be able to cope if they're in a situation like this?
Okay, I think both of the speakers mentioned this very clearly as well. I think it all begins with the survivor themselves acknowledging that what happened to them isn't right, and it doesn't just start with the survivor themselves. It starts with each and every one of us. You don't need to have experienced such a violation for you to be able to actually speak up and change your language and change your perspective and mindset when it comes to sexual abuse or violence of any form. And so it starts with the conversations that we have. And Sakina mentioned this earlier, that it doesn't have to be a mass project or like a campaign done across the country or across borders. It's these little small conversations we have in our households, the little conversations we have with our friends, the little conversations we have with our families. And I think the people who are in the most ideal position to start having these conversations are people who've not experienced any form of violence or any form of sexual abuse. Okay, because we're in a mind state or a mind frame where we can empathize, we can try put ourselves in a survivor's shoes, but we don't have that actual experience. And so there isn't that literal, because sometimes it feels like a literal block that survivors experience when it comes to speaking about their experiences. It's a literal either roadblock, or it feels for some like whenever they want to speak about what they've gone through, like literally they're being choked and their voice cannot literally come out. Depending on how the period in which they've experienced it, it depends on the intensity, depends on the actual act in itself. And so asking people, survivors who've gone through this, to be the ones to stand up and speak up against it is putting them in a very complicated position. Perhaps after they receive treatment, after they've accepted what they've experienced, after they've worked through it, then they can stand up and talk about their experience. And even then, I wouldn't force, as Masuma said, even her platform, you can either choose to speak anonymously or you can choose to use your name. And there's power in using your actual name, because that shows that you've actually 100% healed. And sometimes there's even power in just sharing your story and leaving it anonymous, because you don't owe it to anyone to talk about your experience. You owe it to yourself to heal from your experience. And so for the rest of us, the general population, the men, the women, the children that are of age who can actually start speaking about such things, it is actually in our power to start having these healthy conversations and start addressing the fact that these are the instances where people are violating your rights, violating your personal space, they're disrespecting you, disrespecting the relationship that you have. And that these are the channels we can start using to make sure that the people who are perpetrating are held accountable. And Sakina mentioned something earlier. I know there's two Sakinas. So Sakina Hassan Ali mentioned earlier that not a lot of perpetrators are held accountable. A lot of the time, the blame is put on the victim, or the spotlight and attention is put on the victim. And I used victim this time. Okay, so on the survivor, you see, it will take time for us to change our language. A lot of the attention.
Oh, I think something went wrong with your internet. Okay. Well, we thank Ms. Nadia for giving us a brilliant insight toward this issue, which now opens up the floor for questions. And we've actually received quite a few questions. Okay, this one's directed to Sakina Hassan. So Sakina, what would you say would be the role of parents in this matter?
Okay, that's difficult, right? And I'm not a parent, so I don't think I can come to this with so much experience. I can say what I think could be done. Oh, she's back. Should we let her finish her points, perhaps, and then we can go to the question? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry about that. My Wi-Fi threw me out of the room. So yeah, as I was saying, it needs to start with us and just start having these small, uncomfortable conversations, because the whole situation is uncomfortable. And one of the reasons that there has been such a strong, solid lid that's also kind of sealed with plastic that no one really wants to talk about or open is because it's difficult. You know, it's difficult conversations, it's uncomfortable, and no one wants to be experiencing any form of violence. So speaking out about it openly is very difficult. Yeah, just given the nature of it. So when we start now to normalize having these difficult conversations from an early age, teaching children what is appropriate touch, inappropriate touch, teaching children that even your family member can be a perpetrator, teaching children who they can trust and whom they can't trust, teaching children how people earn their trust, actually, because we learn all these things from childhood. And as adults, we apply what we've learned as we're growing up. So when we just tell children, it's okay, say hello to all the relatives, and these are all family, and we're all family, we're not teaching them that people need to earn your trust. We're teaching them that you need to trust everyone. And so most people would say, oh, you put yourself in this position, or you were there, and this is why it happened. They're coming from a very crazy headspace that for some reason you shouldn't have been in that space, or for some reason whatever happened in that space is your fault. But what's teaching trust from an early age, or who and how people earn your trust from an early age, can also teach us as adults on who we can trust. And if it's a person we don't trust, then it's easier to take action against that person, because even the violation in itself there is more understandable to you, that okay, if it's a person I really trust, it doesn't make sense, how does a person I trust so much hurt me this much, you know? But if we're taught that this is how your trust is earned, and this is how trust is broken, and this is how you treat people, the ones you trust, the ones you don't, then it becomes also easier for a survivor to say, okay, this person violated my boundaries, and also this is a person I don't really hasn't really earned my trust. It becomes easier then to actually speak up with someone that you actually trust and say, this is what happened, because that's the first step. You don't have to go put it out on social media or tell all your friends. It begins with telling that one person that you trust that this happened to me. And hopefully, if we do start having these conversations more, that person that you go to will know what to do, will know how to assist you for you to get the help, the assistance that you need. And it starts like that. Change is very gradual and small. And it really does start just with our words, with our conversations that we have.
Right. Right. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Sorry, Sakina, you can continue. Right? She covered it.
Yeah. So I really think that Nadia has covered the topic very well. So the question was, what's the parent's role? And I think she really, hit the nail. It's very important from a very young age to talk to kids about, you have to have, it's uncomfortable, whatever, but when the kids are very young, I think it's important to kind of talk about these no touch zones. I know, for example, when, we do this sometimes so unknowingly, when an adult wants a hug from a child, very young child, we'll just be like, okay, give him a hug, give her a hug. She wants a hug. He wants a hug. And we don't, when you force a child at that age that, oh, it's okay to give the hug, even if you don't want to, we are thinking about it in terms of, oh, we don't want the other person to feel bad, or no, I want my child to be social. So I'm not saying it comes from a place of like, that we're not taking care of our children, but I think sometimes we fail to realize that, actions like that, forcing the child to kind of give up that, their space later on in life can have consequences. Where like, oh, it's okay if I'm uncomfortable, but this person wants it, and they're older, for example, or they're in a position of power right now, so let me do it. So I think she covered those points really well. The other thing is, finding a way to be very approachable to your children, because if something like that happens, chances are that, when the child comes home, or when whoever it is that it happened to comes home, they'll talk about their families first. I mean, they'll talk to their families first, right? Kids will probably, in the most part, talk to their the adults in their family first, their guardian, their parents. So it's about finding a way and researching and learning, really, maybe learning about how do I talk to my kid even now about these things. How do I make sure that there's a safe space where they can talk to me and they don't have to be scared of me, that I'm not going to punish them for something that happened to them. There's been cases where there are kids of such young ages who are just scared to go up to their parents and tell them it happened. Or what happens now, when the abuse is happening within a family, when adults within the household is abusing a child, right? So we have to perhaps, continue this conversation and figure out, ways that, there's resources available for survivors and for victims to be able to, reach out to. Perhaps, in the Eastern world, we need that a little bit more, because here, for example, if you report it, you're going to be taken seriously. There's going to, there's going to be a case, the investigation and research will be done, and there are safe spaces, for you to go to. A side note that I will add, and this, pertains to parents and survivors as well, is that, seeking help and seeking therapy, is always beneficial. And that's this, because we're talking about taboo topics. This is such a taboo topic. It's such a taboo topic to say that you need mental health help. We all go through different things in life, whether, that's being bullied at school or something that happened in our childhoods. And, we don't want to recognize that it was traumatic. We don't want to recognize that it is trauma for many reasons. One, because we don't want to seem ungrateful. We're like, but how can I call it trauma? People in this world go through worse things. Yes, that's true. But you don't have to minimize your trauma to understand that somebody else goes through trauma. So in these cases, perhaps recognizing that what you are going through is in fact difficult, and you will have difficult emotions, but in order to heal from that, you will need to go through some more uncomfortable conversations with perhaps experts who can really help you. Because friends and family can help to a certain extent, but they're not equipped to understand mental health the way an expert is. And I'm here to say that, if you need it, and sometimes it may be something that we think is so small, but ends up being so significant and affects the rest of our relationships in our lives. And when we seek mental health help, it doesn't mean we want to blame everybody in our lives. It means that perhaps we understood an event that happened in our lives a certain way, or perhaps we were not equipped at that age to comprehend what was happening to us, whether it's abuse or anything else when it comes to mental health. So I really, really encourage that, people seek out mental health help. It's such a taboo topic, but I'm here to tell you that it can help you, in so many different ways, through, when you go through death, when you go through bullying, when you go through abuse, all of these things, we consider that, but like, it's fine. Like, people go through famine and no food and wars, and who am I here to complain about, And sometimes what we don't realize is that when we have these mental health issues, sometimes it comes in the way of our relationship with Allah. We sometimes need to heal from some of these things so that we can have a better relationship with our faith. And which is why I really, again, want to reiterate that the support that we can give as a Muslim community to these survivors is so important, that sometimes if we shame them and we are not supportive, we may be the reason, they leave the faith. And this is a hard conversation to have, but the lack of our support and our voice could be the reason, that they don't feel as connected to the community, and worse, not as connected to their faith. And so I think we should hold ourselves a little bit more accountable as well. So I know I digressed a little bit. I hope that answers the question.
That definitely does. I really think speaking about it, especially with an experienced person, definitely does help a person get out of that dark situation that they're in.
Yeah.
So we have a few questions. The next one would be, how does someone notice that it is no longer a friendly thing? And they would like Nadia to answer that, please.
Thank you. I think the first informant would be how you're feeling. So how are you feeling that setting? Because the moment you are not enjoying yourself, the moment you're uncomfortable, the moment you feel like you want to jump out of your skin, that should be a sign. That's basically your body telling you that we're in a situation we don't want to be in. And oftentimes our minds can kind of they can, what's the word, leave us in the dark at that point, because it's trying to comprehend what exactly is going on. So your thought processes, you probably will just be frozen. It'll be blank, and you might at the end question, okay, why didn't I think of doing XYZ? It's because you're in such an uncomfortable position that your brain kind of took a step back. It was unsure what was going on and had no way of kind of rationalizing or making sense of the situation. And so in those instances, I always recommend that people listen to your gut. What is your body telling you? Because your brain can shut off and leave you on your own to deal with such a situation, but your body is always communicating with you. You would have that gut feel, and a lot of us have gotten into the habit of not listening to our gut feel. We're often in situations that our body is screaming, I don't want to be here, but your mind tries to rationalize and tells you, no, we have to do this and XYZ, or we're here already, so might as well just stay here. And again, when it comes to sexual assault, when it comes to rape, most survivors would, let's say if it happens, you went out with a person and initially everything was going well, and you got to a point where now you're uncomfortable and things are happening and you want to leave. Your body is telling you, we do not want to be here. Our brains tend to rationalize why we should stay and why we should stop feeling uncomfortable. Your mind does that. And it's not a form of sabotage, it's more of a defense. Your body is trying to protect, your mind is trying to protect you, because it's trying to rationalize and make sense so that you can feel a bit better and okay about what's going on. But your body will always just communicate exactly how you're feeling. And so in those situations, rather listen to what your body is telling you. Listen to what your gut feel is saying. Even if your mind's saying, no, but you came all this way, and all these memories and all these teachings that we see, you shouldn't be going out. So if you do go out, you're putting yourself in this position. You've led them on, or something that you've done that's led them to do this, or that made them feel that it's okay to do this. Our mind does that. And it's not that we're telling ourselves that. That's just from memory, from what we've learned, what we've experienced, what we've seen. And yes, our brains are very sophisticated, our minds are sophisticated, but then they're also very limited. But your body is a bit more intelligent, I would say. And so your brain might be telling you, no, it's okay, we came all this way, but your body will be screaming no the whole time. So in those cases, listen more so to your body. If you feel uncomfortable physically, then that should be a sign for you that this is a bit too far and I'm uncomfortable. And try your best to get out of that situation. And I know that it's not always as easy to just stand up and leave and get out of the situation, but at least being mindful and accepting that at the end, that you didn't put yourself in that position, and that you wanted to get out of the situation, and that you respected and listened to yourself and your body, and this person violated your trust, that this person violated your personal space. Because there are instances where a survivor literally can't do anything. It's either you're physically overpowered, or overpowered in a certain way, you know. So it's not that you can get out of the situation just because you want to. Sometimes you physically can't really save yourself or take yourself out of it. But yeah, to answer the question, listen to your gut, listen to your body. What is it communicating with you? And don't always believe what your thoughts are telling you, because sometimes our thoughts play games, and they try to like create illusions to try and just protect us. So it's coming from a good place. It's trying to protect us, but actually it isn't. Yeah, and it's all because of the messaging that we've received, the information we've received from the longest period. You know, it's generational information that we're receiving, especially for women. You know, generationally, women are taught it's okay. Like when we talk about intimate partner violence, most people, let's say married couple, wouldn't really say that my husband raped me, because one, you're taught whatever is happening in your marriage is happening in your marriage. You must keep your dirty laundry inside your household. And these are the messagings from generations women are taught, you know, whether directly or indirectly. These are the messagings that we have. And so in those instances, those messagings come out to kind of justify what the perpetrator is doing. We end up justifying their actions because that's what the society has been doing over the years. You know, so in those situations, rather listen to your body, and honor what your body is actually communicating with you. And
Right,
take note that our minds can also play games on us.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nadia. Our next question is: are there any centers or organizations, as such, and how can they be of any help? So I think Massimo can help us answer that question.
Yeah, I think there are quite a few organizations. I will speak of many in Tanzania itself. There is an organization or a few organizations that are there to help child sexual harassment, whether it's done by family members or like anyone outside. And then there are a few that help with teenage pregnancies that are also have come from sexual abuse. Because we need to understand that when we say teenage pregnancies, I think that we're putting all the blame on the survivors, saying that they got pregnant, but we never say that the violence that was done to them because they're minors. But yeah, there are support groups for that. There's also a few support groups that are helping speak out about it, that address these issues, that they have support sessions like safe space group and things like that. We still have a long way to go in terms of the government helping us. But I think that these small organizations are making quite a bit of noise. And kudos to you guys making some noise, because only when we speak out is when everybody will understand that this is wrong, and that we will be able to make more and more conversation, so that a person who has not been through it knows from before that this is wrong, or someone who has been through it, it finds their healing through speaking about it.
Thank you so much, Massimo. All right, I believe we've reached the end of a very fruitful talk show, and hopefully we have successfully delivered the right message, and have gained some insight or comfort from the speaker's words and knowledge. Once again, we look forward to seeing you all in our next session. We hope that you all are keeping safe. In this time of uncertainty, let us not forget the plight of the people in Yemen. And on that note, the Ahlul Bayt societies, including DABSOG, have collectively initiated a fundraiser termed as 100 for Yemen. Should you wish to contribute to this noble cause, please get in touch with any of the DABSOG members. Follow us on Instagram at DAFSOC. And from your host today, Sakina Rashid, Assalam. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.